Hi everyone, my name is Pranav. I'm the CEO of Chatwoot. Today I'm going to talk about the state of UI UX in open source projects, how you can drive design discussions, and how you can actually promote a design first culture. But before going into that, let me introduce myself. As I mentioned, I'm working on an open source project called Chatwoot. I've been contributing to open source for about 7 years now. I started in 2014 through GitHub. Sales.js was my first contribution. From there, it's been an amazing journey from an open source contributor to now to a open source maintainer. And a little bit about Chatwoot. We are building an open source customer engagement suite built as an alternative to Intercom and Zendesk. We started in 2016. We started out as a proprietary software, but it didn't work out well. So after seeing the data privacy regulations, people moving on to self-hosted alternatives, we thought, why don't we give this a try, and we open source the project. And to our surprise, it got trending in Hacker News. And from there, we have been working for more than a year to build features. And right now, we're building business out of it. So go check out Chatwoot on GitHub and let us know your feedbacks. We are open to contributions. We're open to discussions. Yeah, feel free to do it. Before we jump into the actual topic, let me discuss about the two different aspects, developer experience and product experience. So as an open source project, it's really important for you to concentrate on the developer experience, because it really matters how easy is it to install the software, or how hard is it to maintain, or maybe when there is a new version of the software, how hard is it to upgrade. These all things actually matters in your adoption. So if you want to have better adoption, you would have to make all these things simpler. But there is other aspect as well, the product experience. How you use the product, how well it actually solves the problem. So today I'm going to talk about product experience, not about the developer experience. I think a design in open source projects is actually a pretty debated topic, because most of the projects don't follow a standards, or most of them actually don't have a guideline on how to contribute on design. The one of the reasons which we see for that is because design and development are two independent processes. For designing a better user experience, there needs a group of people with different set of skills working together towards a single goal. There needs to be you need to have designers, you need to have developers who can implement the design, and they need to have communicate between these. There should be a proper communication between these two, and this is not happening in the open source projects. So one of the things which I've understood from my experience working with designers in my previous jobs is that most of them are problem solvers. So they try to identify what exactly is the problem. They try to understand how this problem is affecting the end customers, and then from there, they work backwards to identify what's the right solution and build a user experience around that. This is not happening anywhere in any of the open source projects, because one of the problem with that is most of the designers who's new to the open source project might not have context about what people are asking. So they need to set it up. There needs to understand the product better. It takes a little bit of time for them to actually do that. And second thing is actually most of the open source projects, as we know, starts with one single developer who had a problem. So they wanted to put some thought and then build a small hack, or small product which solves their problem. And then they think okay, this is useful to me, so why can't I open source it? So they open source the product, and afterwards people see the product, and then from there they start adding more and more features to cater a larger set of users. So one of the typical problems which comes to the projects is that, like, since it's not built for a larger audience, I mean, like, they tend to have UX that incurred due to various reasons. One is actually, like, most people would ask you, like, why don't you do X to do Y, or, like, why don't you add an option to do something? So as a maintainer, you want adoption. As a maintainer, you want more people to be using your product. So the immediate thought, or, like, the immediate understanding for you would be to create an option for them, like, so that, like, they can use the product. And this keeps on adding. Like, there'll be, like, a lot of features. There'll be there'll be a lot of options which you provide, so that, like, it caters every set of people. And the end result for that would be something like this. Like, you you would have a smaller system with a lot of function options, with a lot of controls, which might not be relevant to most of the users. So one problem with this is actually, like, most people would have don't won't understand, like, why these many options are provided, or, like, why this this elaborate set of, like, options is given in the product. So it's kind of a learning curve for them. Like, it's not a good UX. So if you're not doing something complex, if you're not doing something like the one which we see in this image, so, like, try to minimize that. And, like, it's really important to understand that you don't have to provide every option which every customer, or, like, every developer is asking you on GitHub. You can always say that, like, why don't you just fork the project and then make option by yourself, so that you can use it. So it doesn't make sense for you to add every set of features, every set of options which people are requesting. So every time you get a request that, like, add a functionality, add an option to do this, just think about whether this is going to create a UX debt, or whether it's going to create more and more problem on our end. Then, like, then after that, like, if you think this is going to be a problem, this is not going to be a useful feature for a lot of people who are using your product, then don't do it. Like, change the code like this, and you can do it yourself. So this happens to me all the time in Chatwoot, because most people, like, we have a broader product, like, with a lot of options, a lot of customizations available. So people would come and say that, like, I want this kind of thing for this use case. And yeah, like, as a developer, as the maintainer of the project, my immediate reaction is like, oh yeah, I think I can provide that. But most of the time, like, I take a step back, like, and talk to the people who are working on the project, like, understand whether this is something that's relevant for the larger set of people. Then if it's not, then we would defer that, or maybe ask the person to actually, build it themselves, because it's open source, right? Like, you can build it themselves, because it's open source, right? Like, you can build it out yourself. You can you can change the code, which is one of the things which you would want to do. If it is not possible to remove that option, let's say, like, you have even though, like, even if you have, like, two options with two type of different options with two yes or no answers, there you have, like, four possibilities. Think about, like, 20 different options with, like, 20 different, like, yes or no questions. Like, there will be, like, a lot of options. There will be a lot of combinations which you have to provide. So most of the times, don't add the feature right away. Just, like, think about whether you can ask the person to say that, like, whether they can build it themselves. If it is not possible, if you think that this is something which is going to be useful for a larger set of users, and still you would have to provide a standard default, right? So if you look at, like, Zoom as an example, so the way we are entering a meeting, it's just one click. But if you want to customize a specific thing, like the way it's being recorded, or, like, the video quality, or, like, the audio quality, it's all there. But it all have, like, all those options have a standard default, so that, like, a new user comes in, or the person who wants to try out the product, has a very simple step to do that. Like, install the software, just click on login, and then click on start a meeting. Then you have that particular meeting opened, right? So you have to think like that, where you have to provide a standard default for all the options which you provide, so that whenever a person comes in, like it's very easy to get started with the project and try to use the project. So we do this at Chatwoot a lot. We have standard defaults for most of the cases which we cover. Even though there is a customizability option, we prefer to have a standard default for all the options which we provide. Second problem here is actually this lack of standardization of design. So the all the design, all the open source projects, if you look at them, it's mostly like, as I mentioned, a developer working on it, and from there building features out of it. So there is a lack of design first thinking. What I mean by that is if you look at any of the web projects out there, it's there will be 10 different types of buttons you can see, or 10 different spacing you can see, or maybe you can even see people writing styles in line. So one of the problems with that is as a designer, if somebody comes to your project, and even there are different barriers for them to actually try and use the product, even then if they did all those, the first thing which they are going to see is the design itself is not standardized, or maybe don't have a guideline which is written anywhere. So their first thought process would be why don't I contribute to this? Why don't I contribute to the base design, make it better? But often it ends up changing a lot of variables, which might not be the right thing for the developer, because it's a lot of work for them to change all this and make it standardized, and they would end up rejecting the proposal, which might be frustrating for the designer. So before you start, think about how you can standardize the options which you take. One of the easiest examples is to take one of the frameworks Tailwind or a Bootstrap or Foundation. Take that as an example, take that as a base style guide for you, and then from there build on top of that. Make the colors with respect to your brand. Make spacing based on what you require, and use the standard colors or spacing, or whatever you are using inside your project. Make it a standard, put it somewhere in a common place, so that everyone who who is interacting with the product knows that this is the place I can go and look at what is the standard being set. So this is what is called design first culture. Whenever a new person comes in, or whenever a new kind of designer who wants to install or use the software, it is easier for them to see what's already there. It makes it less complex for them to understand what are the standards that are being set. So when we started Chatwoot, we were thinking about how we can adopt this system, how we can adopt a design system, or maybe adopt a design language, so that it's easier for us to communicate with other people. So we started searching for the options. It was in 2016. Design system was not a thing, but there was a good guide written by Marvel at that point. So we started from there. We took their design system as an example, and from there we built our own standards. We have our own typography, we have our own fonts, we have our own spacing, or even colors. We customize all those things, but the base idea, or the base layout was taken from other examples. So right now, all of the companies, or all of the products which is out there, who have certain set of guidelines, would follow some kind of design system. And to be honest, I wouldn't recommend anyone to just follow Bootstrap, because it gets worse when you have a lot of components, and there is no way to actually make a standard, or there is no way for you to build standard just by Bootstrap. So it's more about the culture which you build in. Think about standards, think about like a design system, how you can adopt it. Like go check out like different options, like Primer, or Primer is actually like the design system for GitHub. And you can actually go to Refactoring UI, which is a great book which you should follow. Which, like even if you are a developer, or even if you are someone who have not worked much in design, that would actually help you to understand like it would help you to get started and understand how things work. So and second, and one of the options which you can do is actually document the design choices, what colors you choose, what are the components which is available in your project, how what are the different type of options available, so that whenever a new person comes in, you can define a process on how they can contribute to the project, right? You already have all these things documented. And we started this with styleguide.chatwoot.com. So we started our experiments with that. And right now, we are writing a guide so that how a new person who's interested in design can look at how we are dealing with the design. And then from there, they can contribute, or maybe just take inspiration from. So, and the third problem which most of the people face who are designer is they don't know how they can contribute, where they can contribute, and what they can contribute. So the first thing is actually where they can contribute. There is definitely a lack of understanding or awareness about tooling. So GitHub, as you say, or even open source projects, is mostly about code. The amount of people, the amount of people involving in open source projects who are designers is very less. So, and there is a separate movement called open source design and stuff like that. But the core, or the most of the people who are working in open source are not designers. And for designers, it's a big barrier for them to understand how GitHub works, or or any other Git or SVN or any other tools which you use. That's first thing, and there's no way around it. They have to learn it. Second is actually even if they understand GitHub and they come to your project, they don't know what to contribute, right? There will be a set of issues which might be highly technical, which is not really really good to understand. So you have to define an issue which describes what is the expectation here, what are the kind of things which you would want to build, and what can we contribute, or what can external people contribute to that particular issue. Most of the times, if you go to any of the open source projects, it will be there'll be a log, and then this is not working for me, and this is why this is happening. So there is no easy way to filter out these kind of issues, just to make sure that I have a design problem which you can solve. There's no easy way to do that. So one of the things which you want to do is define a process on how you can contribute to design. So first thing is to write down the expectations, have a proper product spec. So let's say you're building a Teams feature, write down a product spec, understand what this feature means to you, then create different types of options which is available, or different use cases which you can solve, and from there label the issues, right? If you have the product spec complete, next you want is a high level design. Maybe people can contribute, it can be a Balsamic mockup, or it can be a Figma design. It can be anything, just to contribute to the design. Label the issues correctly so that people can find it. So first thing you want to do is label them properly with design wanted or something of that sort. And third is actually have a clear owner of the issue and define how you resolve conflicts. So most often, if there are two people who are working, who saw the issue, who wanted to contribute something, then they comes with two different approaches. There is a conflict, and you have to define very clearly upfront that this is the person who is owning this issue, or this is how this issue would be resolved if there are conflicting opinion. And from there, you have to define that process as well. Write down in that particular issue that this is how we accept contributions to this particular issue. say you want to have these many things, and it should not follow these many things, and it should follow your actual design contributions. So like having that clear ownership and having that conflict resolution written inside issues is clearly important. And I think I can give an example of Metabase. So they if you look at their contribution guidelines, there is an option called there is a section where they design the feature, and in this even though it's clearly it might be their internal team working on it, it's very clear that these set of issues which are tagged with design needed is specifically for designs. The UX is complete, or the feature is actually understood, a feature is already written very clearly. You have to understand how there is a clear description of how the functionality would work, and the next thing you want to do is create a design for that. So people can just go there, filter out the label, design needed, then from there they can contribute, or maybe they can provide suggestions, which is not there in most of the projects. And the other way you can approach this is actually by having a process for design. Let's say you have a set of components which is designed, and you have a style guide written for it. So you can either say if the contribution, if you want to do something new in design, just go to the the style guide library, see if the component is already there. If it is there, then you can actually see whether you need to make any changes, or if it is already it already covers everything, then you can just right away use that. If it's not present, if the component is not present, then you can propose a new component design. And if the component you can define all the steps like that, so that there is a written rule, or there is a process which is defined on how you accept design related contributions, which makes it easier for people to contribute as well, right? You go to a project, you understand this is how you can contribute, and then you can jump right in and then contribute. So Primer, as I mentioned, GitHub's style guide is actually they have well-written document on contributing, and maybe you can actually explore other open source projects or other companies' guidelines, which gives you much better decisions. And the last part of it is actually we covered why this is happening, how this is happening, and what are the different things which you can do to improve design contributions. Now I'd like to talk about how to drive design discussions. Driving design discussions is double-edged sword. To be honest, you either get a lot of good responses, or you either get a lot of very bad responses, and there is no way to get around on that. So you have to understand whenever you start design discussions, it can get very steamy. People might be fighting over some kind of very minor colors, or some spacing, but it there is actually a way to provide design discussions. First of the thing is actually whenever you write a feature, put the mockups right inside the issue. Just take a screenshot, put that in the issue, so that when people come to your GitHub, go to issues, click on one of the feature description, they see how this is going to be in when the feature is completed, right? At that point, they might have some options. So this is one of the things which we did from very early on, so that whenever we have a design, whenever we have a new feature which is going to be built, we build the designs or build the mocks in Figma. From there, we take a screenshot and put that on the GitHub issue. And this drove a lot of comments and a lot of discussions based on very particular things. For example, very particular on this one was one of the things which people suggested was to provide an option for them instead of having a text area to add this consent. They wanted to have a standardized consent, maybe they can just change the variables, or their company name, they can just use it right away. Second thing people wanted was to add options for terms and conditions, or privacy policy, which makes sense, because it's all we are saying you're accepting this, and then you want to have all the links together, and then that kind of things like drove discussions in us. So maybe you can experiment with, like, you don't have to have a design like this. You can just use balsamic, or maybe anything like or even like paper written mocks, which can actually drive discussion. So driving design discussions might not really involve designers. It involves people who are actually using the product. So if you are building something out there, you want to have a better understanding how people think about the feature. You don't have to do user research in GitHub, because like your project is open source. You can leverage that as your starting point, create a feature issue request, and then from there, like put the design, ask for contributions, and there just explain very clearly what you're looking for and what kind of feedback you're looking for. Instead of like, if you put something like this without that direction, what happens is like people say that, okay, this text or font size is very small, or maybe like I want to have the heading bit larger. Instead of that, give them clear direction on like what you're looking for as a feedback, and if there is someone who's willing, would provide that feedback. So yeah, I think like that's all I had for today. So basically, like define a process, understand that you need to standardize at some point. So why don't you start at the beginning itself? Like standardize your components, standardize your design system, so that like people can just look at the designs and understand, okay, this is what this guy is actually doing. From there, if you have like standardized design, if you have like a process which is involved in design contributions, you can actually have a third thing where like you just like ask for general public for feedback on specific options, which would drive more and more design discussions. So yeah, I think that's all we had for today. So I was doing this, experimenting this for a long time in Chatwoot. Some of it works, some of it doesn't work. But yeah, I'm really happy to talk to you if you want to like understand how I see about this. Maybe like you can reach out to me on Twitter or on my email, as I shared before. Then yeah, I think like that's pretty much it. Thanks for taking time to watch this talk. Bye bye.